Hello, my name is Rowan Flad, and together with Dr. Jess Beck, I have organized a seminar course for this spring 2022 semester titled Bias in the Practice of Archaeology. In this class, we will be focusing broadly on issues of bias in authorship, citation practices, accessibility, media coverage, fieldwork, training, education, hiring, and promotion, and other related topics. There's a burgeoning literature that not only discusses these issues in the context of archaeology, but also presents empirical studies of patterns that illustrate existing patterns of bias and trends over time, as well as proposing interventions that may be implemented to disrupt existing patterns of bias. This course aims to build familiarity with this literature and to encourage engagement with this empirical research. Jess, could you say a little bit about your motivation for designing the course with me?
Sure. I first got interested in this topic when I was working on a paper of my own on academic publishing. There's a common saying in academia, which is publish or perish or publish. And as an early career academic, I spent a lot of my time thinking about how, when, and where to submit particular papers presenting my research. However, I've also bounced around institutions quite a bit over the last 4 or 5 years. And at different places, I've had people give me different advice on what the top journals are, the top forums for publishing important archaeological research. So I decided to actually test out whether archaeologists shared a common, what I learned is called a prestige hierarchy of journals, whether they rank the same journals as the best or top journals to publish in, or whether there's a lot of variability. And so I worked with 2 colleagues, one who's also an archaeologist and one who's a linguistic anthropologist. So this was a 2-field endeavor, at least, to distribute a survey that asked archaeologists about how they made decisions about where to publish. And as part of doing this research, I started just doing a lot of reading on research and knowledge production in archaeology. Who gets to be an archaeologist? What kinds of research get funded? What kinds of papers get published? And who's getting cited? And what a lot of these recent studies, which as you have pointed out, have an empirical basis, either in qualitative or quantitative research on the discipline, a lot of these studies have demonstrated that there are all kinds of personal, departmental, institutional, or systemic biases that are woven into archaeology and affect our reconstructions of the human past. And so I've really started to delve into this literature, and I think it's a ripe topic for discussion. What was your motivation?
So I've been interested in this topic for quite a while in different ways, particularly, so I work in Chinese archaeology, and there's been a bit of literature that we'll dig into in the English language literature on citation biases and differences in authorship that I've found interesting for the last couple of decades, but very little of that has focused on Chinese language archaeology literature. And so I started kind of getting interested in this a few years ago. But what really hooked me into thinking about the broader set of themes that we'll investigate in the class had to do with a question that was asked to me by a reporter this past year when a very important discovery in Chinese archaeology was announced in the popular media. It was a discovery at a site near where I worked in the past, a site called Sanxingdui in the province of Sichuan. And it got a lot of media coverage in China, but it didn't really get any media coverage in the West, in English language media publications. And a reporter who was reporting from a Chinese media source asked me the question as to why I thought this was the case, when in the same week, an important discovery made in Egyptian archaeology had received a lot of press attention. And I thought that was a really interesting question. I thought I had kind of a bit of an answer for that. And I wrote an op-ed that appeared in the Washington Post that described my belief that one of the main reasons for that has to do with the ways that we see as Americans the roots of our civilization being rooted more in the Mediterranean world than in East Asia, despite having a very diverse ethnically and historical population in this country. So I wrote that op-ed, but I also thought that it would be an interesting explanation to explore a little bit more empirically. And a former PhD here who now teaches at Caltech named Bridget Alex suggested that we delve into the popular media coverage of different archaeological discoveries. And so we've been working on a project over the past 6 months that has been trying to tease out some of the evidence for differences in terms of the way that popular media cover different archaeological finds. And so that's where I'm currently focused on some issues that relate to this literature, but I want to become a lot more familiar with the broader set of discussions of bias, and particularly these issues of interventions that can be adopted to try to disrupt some of the biases that exist in all aspects of the discipline. And so it's something I think we're going to be interested in engaging with, particularly near the end of the term. So could you say a little bit about what the expectations are for the course participants so that those who are watching this video will know about that?
Sure. There's a couple of key aspects of student participation in the class. And given that it's a seminar style class, the first is obviously engagement. So we expect all students to show up, having done the readings, thought carefully about them, to have questions or comments or responses and reactions to some of the stuff we're learning and discussing and talking about. And part of that will be students leading discussion at least once over the course of the semester. So they'll be responsible for leading discussion during one of the course topics, during one of the weeks that we meet. We're also fortunate that we have several visitors coming to class, people who are doing this kind of important empirical research on knowledge production. And these include Laura Heath Stout, who's done an enormous amount of work on publishing and citations and field school costs, and who is actually based in the Boston area right now, as well as researchers like Jake Geddes, who are working on thinking about ways to make archaeology more beneficial for kind of the future of humanity at the large scale. And so students will have the opportunity to talk to some of these people doing cutting edge research and interact with them and ask them questions about their own projects. And that's the third and kind of final key component of student participation is an independent research project. For students taking the class at the undergrad level, that project can be focused on kind of a literature review or exploring the existing literature on a particular aspect of bias in archaeology. For students taking the course at the graduate level, they're going to be conducting their own research projects. So collecting their own data, conducting their own analysis that explores some aspect of bias in archaeology. And we're going to spend a lot of time scaffolding these projects. So we'll have someone who's a specialist on IRB policies come in to talk to us about how to ethically collect data on living human subjects. And we'll also have students do a pitch day about halfway through the class where they pitch the topics of their independent research project so we can give them feedback, check in, make sure everyone's on track. And then finally, at the very end of the class during our last meeting, students will present the results of their own research. How does this play into student evaluation? How do these kinds of factors affect the distribution of grades and feedback?
Yeah, so the breakdown of the class grade will be based on the weekly class participation, which we weigh quite heavily because we're very interested in having an engaged class the whole time. So that's 35% of the grade. 15% of the grade will be discussion leadership. So those people who are assigned in a particular week to lead the discussion and ensure that we have that we're dealing with all the material that's been assigned will be part of the grade. The research paper will be 40% of the grade. And then the presentation that goes along with that will be the final 10%. So this hopefully has given you a good sense of what the class is about. We really hope that you'll join us in this coming semester.
And our first meeting is going to be on Wednesday, January 26th at 9 a.m. The class is held on the 5th floor of the Peabody Museum in room 561. We hope to see you there.
Hope to see you there. Bye.